Welcome back, everybody. So you are what we call in workshop technology, we call you guys the hardcore participants. The ones who stayed till the very last session on the very last day. I'm sure a few others will join, but we must proceed lest we keep you here longer than you wish to be kept. We have this afternoon, I think, a kind of a mix of styles. We'll start with a couple of sort of introductory inputs, including 3 presentations. So that's why you're kind of facing this way for now. And by the way, thank you very much for your wonderful cooperation in getting us to this point. Much appreciated. Then after the presentations, we go into a Q&A, and that's where this format is designed for, so that we can have a more collaborative, community-looking kind of space where we're speaking with each other and not across the room at each other or upstairs and downstairs kind of thing. Cool? So that's to explain why we've made this move. Again, thanks very much for your help. Now, just to kick us off, I'll ask Calvin to perhaps give us a few words of welcome, after which we'll have a couple of inputs from WWF. So, Calvin.
Right on. So, good afternoon, everyone. And it feels strange for most people saying welcome again, because I told you welcome this morning. But for those who came late, like Deshawn, and Ms. Davis is shaking her head because she knows she came really late. I will say welcome, and I see another person from GGMC. Say welcome. I think we've been here now a day and a half plus and going on, and it's been very, very meaningful, and I feel like I have a sense of purpose in this setting. Like, you know, all of the work that went in over the last couple of weeks means something. So this whole engagement, I think, the possibilities of what emerges out of this are very, very significant for the institutions and for the country as a whole and the mining sector in particular. So with that, this particular engagement was intended to be a different one. So I'm really looking for the new faces. The other folks that I guess, you know, in traditional Guyanese thing, you know, come in perhaps a little later on. But again, welcome back to this new session. And really, this part is run by Lachi, as he has on his name badge. When that name first came up, it was completely strange to be saying it, but in person it seemed a little better. Online it was really weird. And you back at Laurence, and he's the one taking us through this entire session.
Thanks, Calvin. Now, I went to my high school call name because we have a Laurence. So to avoid confusion, Laurence and Laurence, they just call me Lachi. But yeah. So WWF has played a key role in the process so far, and for the next few minutes, we'll hear a few words from them for the benefit particularly of those who are just joining us. The WWF has been a key player in organizing and supporting this gold mining in Guyana mercury project. So it'll be done in 2 parts. First, we'll hear from country manager Aiesha Williams, whom we all have been working with, at least those who are here for the last day and a half. Aiesha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I have to think before I say oh, Lachi, that's it, perfect. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. Good afternoon. I see very few new faces, very few, so I'll keep my remarks short, considering most of you have been here for the last day and a half and now going into 2 days. I'm Aiesha Williams, country manager for our office here in Guyana, WWF-Guianas. I'm also conservation lead, which I've reduced somewhat when it comes to public and covering both Guyana and Suriname. And I'm grateful to be here, and more so, we are happy to be co-hosting this conference and now this stakeholder discussion with the University of Guyana. Thanks to Calvin's leadership from the university side to bring all of this together and really identify the key areas where we need to discuss and also to plan for. I like the plan for part because after discussion, oftentimes people expect action and you want action, and that's the only way that you'll get change. The discussion is very important. However, seeing action afterwards is even more key to having change. This conference is part of our supporting mercury phase out in the Guyanas project, which we are in the final year of implementation. WWF-Guianas, WWF France, my colleagues are here, and IRD, Institute for Research and Development, shortened, and Alliance for Responsible Mining, who you have not heard from, are partnering. These are the lead key implementing partners that have been implementing this project over the last 2.5, 3 years. And the focus, as the name suggests, really is to work with partners in both Guyana, local partners in both Guyana and in Suriname, and to some extent learning from French Guyana on identifying areas, technologies, practices, and including using a results-based approach in terms of mercury data to support both countries in shifting from mercury use in gold mining, or at least reducing the use of mercury in gold mining. Our focus has been on the small-scale sector, and we're now developing the pilot sites where we're using, developing technologies or using new technology to work with miners to reduce or remove the use of mercury. We're still getting there. We're in the final year, so we do hope that we would be able to demonstrate at least some things that are plausible and acceptable by small-scale miners. And I think more than ever, this has been a learning exercise for us, WWF, in terms of convening stakeholders, convening partners and organizations as to how we can find solutions to work through some of the issues of gold mining, environment, and human health. And this conference is really focused on the health aspect of it, environmental and human health aspect of it, and looking at data and information as to how we can understand what the impacts and risks related to mercury, but also other impacts from gold mining, and how we can understand what the impacts are, and then finding solutions to address them. So we address it in the aspect of understanding the data, but then looking at the practices aspect of it, and also in a bit of policy and coordination among stakeholders, and arranging how we can work together to address the issue. And this is really captured within the mission of WWF, where we aim to see people living in harmony with nature. And it's not, when you hear WWF, you think about wildlife. And we definitely are not focused on that only. At least that's not the interest of myself or director that just came in. That's not in the interest of him and many other of our colleagues here in WWF. We are focused more on that holistic look of life within, on land, and water, around our environment and in countries, looking at the context of people and how they live and how they interact with the environment and nature, and how we can find better ways for that interaction to be positive and benefit for people and also for nature. And so that project really captures that, that mission of WWF. And so we thank you for being a part of this discussion, identifying solutions and actions of how there can be changes. Even in this final year of our implementation of our project, we can utilize some of the inputs that were made here, especially today and even discussed yesterday, to really, make an impact in how our project that we're implementing currently can at least set some starting areas or starting points, or build on what's already being done to really make that change within the gold mining sector, but also influence policy, how stakeholders and partners work together in addressing these issues. We really selected to have not only a broader stakeholder discussion, but really look at science, scientists, researchers, technical persons coming together and having that discussion. Next week, we will be visiting different communities also and sharing this kind of information in a different way and having the discussion with communities in a different way also. And so we thank you for contributing to this, and we look forward to this final part of the discussion as we move forward. And we have our donor partner online, Diane Menard, from the, you heard me say this a couple of times, or I'll say it a couple of times over the last 2 days, that this project that I just spoke about is financed from the French Environment Facility, or the French GEF as I call it. And Diane is online. I'll just ask her to just introduce herself and say a few words. And thank you for listening to me.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Good morning, I guess, for you, or afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be there and to be able to at least follow part of the workshop you have today. Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Diane Menard. I'm a project officer in the French Facility for Global Environment, and in charge of the portfolio of projects on pollution, circular economy, and waste management. So the French Facility for Global Environment is really pleased actually to support this very important project. This is a topic that we are really interested in, and really happy to be able to support key stakeholders in the country in undertaking activities. This is something that we are really trying to support as much as possible within our funding. So hopefully I will be able to join at some point and meet you in person in the country. But for today, I'm really happy to participate online, or at least to be able to follow part of the session online. Thank you.
Friends will join us this afternoon, because this is the session where we were hoping to have a wider stakeholder discourse. Hopefully, over the course of the next 3 presentations, we'll have a few more of those friends come join us. And in the meantime, those who are kind of hanging on the wings, so Liverpool, Dr. Singh, welcome. feel free to come join us in the circle here so that we can have a little more of a cozy community feel. There are a few chairs in front here, and I think a couple. We can always small up ourselves over here as well. Cool. We're going to have three presentations. The first is on the state of the art on ASGM impacts on the mercury cycle, from emissions to the human exposure. For about 15, 20 minutes, we're going to be walked through. And Dr. Laurence is no stranger. She was in group number 2 all this morning, discussing our dialogue and policy making. But Dr. Laurence, I don't know if you would like to use the podium or if you'd like to do it from yours. Right, so we're going to need the little clicker thing, and we have some slides, so please. Would you like to walk around, or would you like me to set the mic? Okay, here. And this?
Okay, good afternoon. I'm happy to share with you some general knowledge on mercury cycle and the impact of AGM on this cycle. I won't speak about the results we obtained in Guyana and in Suriname in the frame of the project Aiesha just presented before, because we presented that yesterday, and well, it was more, it's more a presentation, a general presentation of what is occurring, mainly in South America, and why it's important to deal about this issue. So I first apologize for all the participants who were there yesterday, because I will repeat most of my talk yesterday, but shortly. So I'll do my best to respect 15 minutes. So next one, please. I don't have the next one. Yeah. So just is a general view of the origin of mercury emissions all over the world in terms of geographic distribution. I'm sorry, I don't have the pointer. Yeah, but I wanted to, but I wanted to show something on the slide. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the geographic distribution of the mercury emission all over the world, and the distribution by country, by region. So you have here the first region in terms of mercury emission in the atmosphere is mainly Asia with China, because one of the main anthropogenic source of mercury emission are the coal plant, are the energy production by coal combustion. And the first country in terms of this kind of energy combustion is China. So here you have mainly the mercury emission due to industrial and energy production in Asia and in China. Here are the mercury emission from South America. And you will see in the next slide that, that the mercury emission in South America are mainly due by ASGM, by artisanal and small-scale gold mining. It's about 53% of total mercury emission due to this activity. This activity is So it's very important here in South America, but also in Africa, mainly in West Africa, where this activity is highly developed too. The other source of, regarding the part of the AGM in global mercury emission in the atmosphere, AGM is responsible of 38% of the mercury emission at the global scale, so it's quite high. This data were published recently in 2018. AGM is also the first source of mercury in the rivers in hydro system, and it has been estimated to reach almost 900 tons per year of mercury. So it's mainly particulate mercury, but the mercury is stored on particles which enter after soil erosion into the rivers. South America, as I told you, is responsible of 53% of mercury emission only by AGM. But it's not only the mercury emission is not only due to the burning, to the amalgam burning, but it's mainly due also to another process, to the soil, to the increasing of the soil erosion. Because when you are logging, when you are cutting trees and so on, when you are deforesting the mining area, of course you are increasing the erosion process, which increase the input of mercury into the rivers. So this activity, the mining deforestation, is also very important, and it has grew up sixfold in between 1985 and 2020, only in the Amazon region. Of course, AGM is also a large contributor of gold supply over the world. It reached about 20% of the global gold supply. And this gold, of course, has several uses in jewelry, 46%, retirement funds, electronics, and also national treasure. And especially, and this treasure can increase in crisis period, like now. The AGM also, it's interesting to see the number of employment it's open. So we estimate between 14 and 80 millions of people directly involved in AGM all over the world. So most of them in South America and Eastern Africa. But also, and yesterday we had a very interesting presentation of Stefan, who is not here, but from the university. It also finance, I see you here. It also finance conflicts. Sorry. What happened? Sorry. It also finance conflicts and facilitate, of course, money laundering. So mercury has natural sources too, not only anthropogenic, and the main natural sources are volcanic sources, mercury emission, and a lot of metals and toxic metals are emitted by the volcanic activities, which is not pretty important here in Guyana and in Suriname, but in South America, of course, it's an important source. Rock excavation, soil erosion, as I told you before. And we estimate that the geogenic emission, natural emission, reach almost 600 tons per year. When we compare this geogenic emission to the anthropogenic emission, it's quite low because the anthropogenic emission may reach 2,500 tons per year, mainly due to the energy production, as I explained to you, coal plants, mining activity, of course, mining, mercury mining, gold mining, silver mining. It's also used in chemical industry, in electrical industry. Some lamps, for example, low energy lamps also contains an important quantity of vapor mercury, so be careful not to break them in your house. It's also used in dentistry, in implants, so there is, in general, in the National Action Plan, proposed by the countries who ratified the Minamata Convention. They propose also to stop with implants, with dentary implants that contain mercury. And also, of course, agricultural practices, because deforestation also has an important impact on the mercury emission. And biomass burning too. When you are burning trees, when you are burning the forest, the vapor or the fume also contains metals, heavy metals, and contains mercury. Oops. I will present just a simplified cycle of the mercury in AGM area, in the gold mining area. So, as I explained to you, when the fry and the biomass burning, also the amalgam burning, the mercury gold amalgam burning emits mercury into the atmosphere, mercury vapor. So the mercury, we can find it in different forms, in vapor in the atmosphere, dissolved in the water, or sorbed onto the particles. And also, so after burning, so the mercury vapor can be transported over hundreds of kilometers in dry atmosphere. And when it encounters wet atmosphere, this mercury is reduced and can be precipitated and reach the forest, the soils, and also the river and the lake. And in the lakes, in the aquatic hydro system, you have several processes. You have three important processes. The first one is the methylation, that is to say, it's the process that transforms the inorganic mercury coming from the soil erosion or from the atmospheric deposition onto the soil. It's methylated, that is to say, it's transformed into its organic form in methyl mercury, which is the neurotoxic form. And later, this mercury is bioaccumulated in individuals that are living into the river, but also this mercury is also bioamplified, biomagnified into the food chain. So fish that are eating other fish can be highly concentrated, can be highly exposed to the mercury. We estimated that, and what is happening is that the organic form, the methyl mercury, is the main form that is bioamplified into the food chain. And in the first level of the trophic chain, the methyl mercury content is around 10 or 20%, but in piscivorous species, it's almost 100%. And the ratio between the concentration we can measure in water, which is around 1 nanogram per liter, it's really low, compared to the concentration we can measure in mussels of piscivorous fish. The increase can reach more than 1 to 20 millionth fold. So these processes are highly important naturally. So we also can find in rivers, in Amazonian rivers, high concentration of mercury in piscivorous fish, even in places where you don't have any mining activities. So the factor that controls the mercury accumulation in the trophic chain and in fish depends on several factors, like the trophic level, as I explained to you. The piscivorous fish are highly concentrated compared to omnivorous or frugivorous. The age and the size of the fish, but the age is most important than the size. The growth rates, when the growth rate is rapid, the accumulation is less important, less rapid. Hydrologic period too, because it depends on the feeding of the fish species. Of course, one important point also is to know if the species you are eating and you are studying are migratory or sedentary, because if you want to know if this place is contaminated by mercury due to the human activity, you should compare sedentary fish species between different areas, because the migratory species can live in other places and can, of course, eat other fishes that have been in other contaminated places. So it's important to compare what is comparable. And of course the live places, because what we observe too is that the methylation process, that is to say the process that is transforming the inorganic mercury on organic neurotoxic mercury, takes place mainly in reservoir, in lakes, in floodplain lakes, in sediments, but also in the roots of aquatic plants. So certain places in the drainage basin are specific places for methylation process. Regarding the impact of the mercury on human health, what we observed since a long time, one of my first work, it was in Bolivia more than 20 years ago, we observed very high concentration, very high exposure of Amerindian communities who were living, some of them were living close to mining activities, others completely far, and the mercury exposure could be very, very high. So the World Health Organization proposed a limit of 10 microgram per gram, but we observed, colleagues who are working in epidemiology observed that this limit is very high, and the first symptoms can be observed with just half of this limit, 5 microgram per gram. So the specificity of the Amazonian population is that their dietary habits are the main source of mercury. The main source of mercury of the people are the fish diet. And the fish diet, it's important because it's one of the first source of protein of this population. And also they are, of course, exposed to other endemic diseases like malaria, yellow fever, and so on. And what we observed also is that the high level of mercury exposure reduce the immune system. So in general, we can observe also, oil and gold miners, but mainly in indigenous community, high rates of yellow fever or malaria, which can be increased by the mercury exposure. And the sign of neurology deficiency appear for high value of exposure. 2 minutes? Bon. So the health risks depend on the form of the mercury in which you are exposed. Inorganic, mainly for gold miners and people who are selling gold in gold shop, and the organic mercury absorbed by diet. So the toxicity depends on the organic form, and it can reach to a neurological disorder, even for liquid mercury, and for trembling is the most effect we see with gold miner, trembling, and also the vision gingivitis, and also vision pain. And the toxicity of organic mercury is also, we observed difference in coordination of the legs and the arms. We also observe a decreasing of the vision. We observe the color perception and so on. So to monitor organic mercury exposure, we are doing analysis of human hair, while to measure and to biomonitor the inorganic mercury in gold miners, the best biomarker is urine. Yeah, so it's different. You have to take care of the biomarker you use depending on the pathway of exposure. And it can reach, of course, the immunity, as I told you, and neurological disorder, which can be irreversible, mainly when the exposure is intraenteral, because the mercury has a high affinity for the brain, and the ratio between mercury concentration in brain and in blood is around 6. So we worked a lot. We have several experiences in different countries in South America, and we worked also on the empowerment of local population and indigenous population. We were living close to rivers, and we were thinking of how helping people to reduce the exposure. So of course, as I told you, the main pathway of exposure is the diet, the fish diet. but the fish diet is also important because it means preserving cultural tradition. People are fishing, so they promote physical activity and so on. It also avoids the junk food. And so what the Canadian team organized in Brazil is that they propose some folders, some comics too, to explain what it can happen if you are exposed to mercury by your diet, on vision impact, on pregnancy too. We do several campaigns in French Guyana too, showing the pictures of fish you can eat daily and picture of fish you may avoid or eat once a week or once a month, mainly for people who are highly exposed, that can be a vulnerable population, like pregnant women or kids. So in French Guyana, we realized this, we did this poster after a lot of analysis. We analyzed almost 6,000 fish all over the country in 10 years. So all this information was really helpful to explain which kind of fish people could eat and other could avoid. And we observed in the Tapajos River and also in French Guyana a decreasing of the mercury exposure in this community after years of information campaigns. So I'm finished. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Laurence. Yes, I didn't have that bad-behaved co-facilitator here today, so he's parked. Thank you very, very much. We'll move on to Loic, who will speak about gold mining and its environmental impacts going beyond mercury. So please welcome Laurence. Loic, sorry.
Yeah. So, good afternoon. I hope the nap was good after this lunch. So, as Laurence said, I will speak about gold mining and its environmental impact going beyond mercury, because we spoke a lot about mercury during those... No, I will try to follow your advice and avoid speaking with my hand and so on. So I will try to keep close to the mic. Okay, so speaking about the environmental impact of gold mining, and going beyond mercury, I gathered in this presentation some studies and experience from many places around the world, and it's not focused on Guyana, mostly stuff from French Guyana actually, a bit from Suriname, Peru, even Mongolia. So it's just to highlight the fact that there is not only mercury as an issue sometimes when we check at the impact of gold mining activity. This stuff don't like me, huh? Doesn't like me because I will have the same issue as yesterday, does it? Thanks. So just to start with, I want to speak about the rock to metal ratio. It comes from a new study. It's last year. And it's about the amount of waste rock, tailings, and processing losses that we have during the production of 1 unit of finished metal. So basically it means that during the mining, your commodity or targeted metal is diluted in a parent rock, and you need many processes to reach the last step of the pure metal that you want. And when you look at gold, which is here on the graph, so it's here the rock to ratio and all the commodities. Here it's gold, and you see that he has the highest rock to metal ratio value in all the commodities that we have on Earth. So it means that we have that mining activity, gold mining activities, they generate the highest amount of tailings and rock waste that we could have when we do mining for this metal. So, again, sorry for that. So, of course, it will generate a lot of impact. We can imagine that. So here, I just put it 3 pictures. Those one are from Guyana, it's from Maja. One is in the Potaro River, it's one of the dredges that you can have. And you can see some of the impacts that we have with this mining activity. We have here destruction of river banks, also modification of the sediment transport, because you see that there is a sandbank somewhere where we're not supposed to have one. Here you have destruction of the soil. You have also in all of them forest degradation, deforestation, of course. This was also presented yesterday a lot. Over erosion and increasing of turbidity, and this make me do a quick link to mercury, because as I presented the result of the project yesterday, we saw that there is no liquid mercury pollution, but it doesn't mean that there is no higher rate of mercury in the system, meaning that by over erosion we increase the fluxes of mercury in the system, and then what happened with methylation and transfer to the biosphere and transfer to the food chain, this we don't know. So erosion is also a key impact of gold mining activities. So I wanted to insist a bit of also deforestation and forest degradation, because it could add more turbidity in the river or more over erosion in addition to the mining activity itself. Here it's the figure for Guyana, presented already here. Here I just wanted to show this study from Madre de Dios in Peru. All the color you have here are the mining sites, and they saw that 100,000 of hectares of forests were lost during those mining activities, which is huge in the last 30 years. Here we see also that there is a significant change in forest covered in South America due to gold mining. Deforestation, as I said, trigger additional erosion. Also in this paper, they saw that the soil erosion was increased by 2 to 4 times due to deforestation. In this paper, it's from Mongolia, so there is no forest, of course, but just to highlight that even when there is no forest, study shows that the soil erosion is increased by gold mining. So what are the consequences of those impacts? There is quite some. The first one is, it's not by order of importance, it's just a list. So we have CO2 emission, of course, with deforestation and loss of carbon storage due to that. Also the fossil fuels used to produce energy to do gold mining, they are quite important, and this paper highlights the fact that in the Tapajos River in Brazil, 1 kilogram of gold needed 16 tons of CO2, meaning that, for instance, I'm coming from Toulouse in France, it represents 10 trips from Georgetown to Toulouse by plane return, which is huge. Also, you have loss of biodiversity, so destruction of habitats and ecosystem due to deforestation again, but also because of high level of turbidity, there is mud going to the riverbed and the plants are dying. We have destruction of soil, of riverbanks. This paper from French Guyana used eDNA to assess the level of biodiversity damage and erosion in the Maroni River at the border with Suriname, and they saw here for fish and here for mammals that the more there is deforestation, the more there is an erosion of biodiversity. And in those areas, we know that deforestation is 85% of gold mining activities. You also have a loss of water quality. There is an increase of pathogen in the river, zoonosis, Escherichia coli, for instance. You have an increase of turbidity and metal pollution, so the quality of drinking water is lowering. And of course, we have a loss of resources, like loss of farming possibilities due to soil degradation, loss of fisheries in the Maroni River, again in French Guyana. riparian people, they are really concerned about that, and they saw that their fish resources has decreased over the years. Also hunting opportunities, because there is loss of biodiversity, but also competition with some miners sometimes, especially in French Guyana, but it's another context. So you see that there is a lot of impacts, and it generates concern. And I will finish on this slide. This is a press release that was done by the Amazonian National Park in French Guyana, the scientific council of this national park, and you see that the three more important impacts that they were lighting during this press release was sedimentary pollution, loss of water quality, and decrease of resources. And mercury is not on this list. So again, that's the goal of this presentation. It was to show that there is not only mercury in terms of gold mining impact on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. Yeah, I didn't even get to use this one. We never used this one for the whole conference, and it just came, and I'm so disappointed. Look, you beat me to it, man. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
So we have one more very, very important presentation by Aiesha Williams. She's going to do a synopsis of some of the major things that have come up so far, with a particular emphasis on this morning. Because remember, for those of you who are just joining us now, this morning we had 4 groups where we focused on specific aspects of the topic environmental and human health considerations. Specifically, we looked at, and I'll ask for help from the participants here, we had one group that looked at standardization of methods and technologies so that we can improve those standards for improved measurement and stuff like that. The second group looked at strengthening the connection between the knowledge we're creating and policy-making processes. How do we feed the learning into policies, regulations, etc. The third group looked at community empowerment based on access to information, an important piece of the puzzle. And the fourth group looked at new research and innovation, like what next scientifically and also from an innovation point of view do we want to suggest for the future. So that's, for those again who missed this morning, that's what we did before lunch. So without any further ado, I'll ask Aiesha to take the floor and walk us through a synopsis. Yeah, I'm gonna welcome the lady. Oh.
I had one clap already, so not again. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'll try to do quickly, just go through the synopsis for the conference, for the benefit of the few that weren't here yesterday. I'll just spend a minute or two just to touch on a few points that were presented yesterday. And then also look a little bit about today, as Laurence said. So the aim of the conference is to create a common space to discuss the assessment and reporting methods of environmental and human health issues related to gold mining, and to explore approaches to mitigate these issues, and also strengthen collaboration and research collaboration for research and community empowerment. And we have had a number of representatives from organizations, NGOs, state agencies, association, the Mining Association, and other students, researchers. And during day one, there are a number of issues that were presented, but also discussed around methods, research methods, findings, and also mitigation as it relates to gold mining, environment, and human health. We touched on some key themes, such as environmental responsibility, sustainable and safe environment, piloting and testing of mercury-free technologies, protection of people and environment, promotion of use of economically friendly and user-friendly technology for minors. We talked about health and safety and exposure to hazardous chemicals, impact of mercury use on water quality and aquatic life. And so those are some of the areas that we touched on. And what we did today really is to delve into some of these issues that we heard over the over yesterday and these topics. We divided into 4 groups, expertly facilitated by Laurence here again. And we had 4 groups in the room, and participants online were, of course, in one group. There were a few participants online. And so there were 4 topics each of these groups addressed, and the online did all 4 of the topics. The 4 areas that we covered during this morning, one group focused on standardization of methods and technologies for mercury assessment. The second group focused on implications of current knowledge on mercury to improve dialogue with policy makers. Third group, a community empowerment initiative based on access to information, and we talk a little bit of a Mercury Observatory we knew about. And the 4th group covered next steps for research and innovation. I'll try to just give you a short synopsis of what each of the group covered, but also what were their assignments. So for group 1, on the standardization of methods and technologies for mercury assessment, they were asked to discuss what methods and technologies should be standardized for future assessments and how might that standardization be achieved. And we had a number of scientists, researchers, and maybe technicians in that group, and they really did some strong science discussion. Some of it went over my head, even though I'm science-based. But on the biology side, I'm on. But it was useful because they discussed and presented in the plenary the focus on standardization of methodologies, what practices work, what practices should be adopted. And they said that it was, there should be a valid protocol. That's important, not only for sampling, but also for analyses. Sampling preparation is important, and especially once we have those strong protocols for sampling and analysis, it makes the work very efficient, but ensuring that that the data that's produced, the results that would be produced is reliable and quality data. Important also to note, they emphasize having instrumental collaboration. I remember clearly that collaboration during analyses also, not at the start and then the next time, but really during the process, and even after a few samples being analyzed, there should be calibration. Just to wrap up, they indicated that the best way to ensure that across the board, both nationally but also the region and globally, is to have collaboration across labs, for strong laboratory analysis, to have collaboration across the board, not only in country but globally, and having MOU or agreements among the laboratories so that the protocols that are developed are agreed by all, and so that they can be utilized by all, based on that collaborative effort of developing good protocols and then, of course, agreeing to utilize them for the strong, reliable science and analyses that we all can use. Group 2 they're focused on implications of current knowledge and Mercury to improve dialogue and with policymakers. So not having scientists on this side and policymakers on the other side, but how can we have that connectedness with these two groups? And I say groups, not that they're separate from each other, but there can be the good conversation, good sharing of knowledge, and use of knowledge in decision making for strong policies. Their assignment was given the current knowledge on Mercury, what are the apparent public policies and policy adjustments and adjustable tactics and strategies for dialogue with policymakers? So group 2 said they give a basic overview of the current policies and procedures on Mercury and gold mining. They discuss some of the obstacles and levers related to this issue or these issues. They reflected on regulations and legislative framework. Some they identified that are maybe outdated and which also affects implementation, enforcement, and seeing impacts on the ground as policy is intended. If it's outdated, then there's a challenge there in ensuring that there's positive change. They also noted the discrepancies between short-term economic gains and long-term health implications, which sometimes frequently are overridden. So that's group 2. Group 3, this is the group that I was in, but I'll read what I see here and not to go overboard on the group that I was in. So we focused on community empowerment initiative based on access to information. We talked a little bit about the Mercury Observatory of the Amazon that the WWF Brazil developed, but has now transferred to the Amazon Cooperation Treaty. And so we discussed not only about the observatory, but other areas of community empowerment and providing information. So the focus was to say, to indicate what are effective and efficient modalities for communities to access Mercury-related information. And so and focused on also on addressing the needs of persons in various communities, especially those affected by mining. So how can we address their needs? And we also discussed having insight on the importance of having technical information and ensuring that it's accessible and in a manner that community members can understand and can relate to, but also use in the decision making or advocacy. And there are different modes of sharing information and ensuring that we understand what communities need and also how they would like to interact with the information that's provided. We also talked about not only providing information to communities, but also how communities can give input into the kinds of research that is done. So setting the research agenda, and not scientists or researchers setting in institutions setting the agenda for research only, but having the scientists in communities, having the researchers that are community members giving input into the research agenda. It was also important, it was identified also that it's important to have information readily available for all ages, including students, also using citizen science, and having that, important here again, having that bottom-up approach. We talked about using existing mechanisms like the National Two-Shows Council and other the village development plan process to really influence what sort of research and what sort of information is provided to communities for communities. And touching back on the observatory, we talked about it would be important to not only look at that the information at a broad scale on the observatory that exists at the Amazon level, but how can we make a similar platform for information locally available at the scale for communities and that they can access for their respective communities. For group 4, that group spoke about next steps for research and innovation. Their assignment was really to focus on, bearing in mind research already done in Mercury, what are the next key steps that should be considered when it comes to future research, and what are the opportunities to develop innovative research approaches and technologies. And they discussed a lot around mercury, naturally occurring mercury, or human, or mercury occurring in environment through human actions. They also spoke about occupational health and safety and developing proactive approaches for monitoring and evaluating mercury, which will allow moving forward. And so by doing this, we will be able to identify hotspots and establish trends so that a holistic view of mercury and mercury impacts can be understood. Thank you. I bring the blackout? I hope not.
So the first question in Q&A is, how come this PA system still working in the blackout? Just, okay. It's back up? Okay. All right, so before we proceed, I want to ask for us to further reconfigure the room so that we complete this circle here. And how that could happen is if the folks who are sitting on the fringes, this side and that side, if you could just bring your chairs and complete the circle so we can not have a back and front conversation, but you want to just, yeah, you could come in this space if you want. That's all right. That's all right. That's good. Everybody managed to get in? You might have to push back. How much more people need to get in? If you can make it slightly bigger, yeah. Okay. So I see people already taking advantage of the opportunity to take a coffee break. I think we should actually keep rolling till we finish. I don't think we should stop for a coffee break. So that being said, not that you all need to get up and run right now, because I know you just had lunch, but if you feel the urge to grab a beverage or grab a snack, just feel free to, without disruption, just quietly, gracefully go get your thing and come back. Cool? So we're going to integrate the coffee break into the work, and that way we can finish sooner, right, Benita? You're nodding. You like that? All right, cool. Now, let's just quickly check around the room. Who is new from the previous day and a half? Who is here this afternoon for the first time? No, you were here this morning. This afternoon, yeah. We're talking about the freshies for this afternoon. So everybody here is familiar with things. So, but let me just in case, I mean, I know David is new. He can't hide from it, but he's ignoring me right now. I was going to check and see if any new people had any questions for Laurence or Loic. But since there are no new people, but just to check, any questions for clarification based on the presentations from, the technical presentations from Dr. Laurence and Dr. Loic? Any questions, comments? Yeah, Patrick.
Hi, good afternoon again. I'm looking, you were talking about a lot of soil erosion and erosion generally, right? So, and you were looking at mercury and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we know is that we have some other toxic metals within the sediments, things like arsenic and so. I believe we need to start looking at those also. Because when we do this, when you look at the kind of disruption of the soil and the lower clay levels that you get when you do the mining, also when these guys eat into the bank the way we do our river mining or into the things, right? There's a lot of turbulence and a lot of breaking up of the soil. And I think you can very easily remove a lot of, or I could say free, a lot of these heavy metals that can be toxic from various, with various mechanisms of toxicity. So I think that might be something we would want to look at. I can think immediately about arsenic.
Yeah, it's for sure. It's the same. It's as long as you increase the sediment in the system, you increase the fluxes of metals coming from the particles that are in the system. So it's the same as mercury. The only way is that different is that there is we don't know what there is in the rivers now. So we need to analyze the sediment and so on. To be honest, with the project, we collected some sediment. We analyzed it for mercury, and we also did some experiment analysis for the metal content of the sediment, not for Guyana, for Suriname only now, but we don't have the result yet. It's still really long to work with, but yeah, basically, yeah, we need to check also what there is in those rivers.
In addition to that, Patrick, I just want to say that the Geology and Mines Commission has over the years been doing geological sampling at a reconnaissance level across Guyana. And arsenic, antimony, and some other minerals and elements like that. So there are people in Guyana right now who have a good idea where there are arsenic highs. And I could tell you Tasawini is one, Marudi Mountain is another one, Arakaka is another one, and further down the road from Arakaka. So we know that once you cut those rocks, you facilitate the movement of the elements into a pathway that others may wish to utilize and then have. And arsenic is a slow, very, very slow poison. So it could be going on for 15, 20 years before you get hit hard with it.
So any reaction, Laurence, Loic?
Let me just say.
Reacting to yourself? Or?
I call two names. Tasawini, Chinese landing is the same place. And the arsenic is evident in the material there, and it's been evident for over 75 years. Marudi Mountain is an active mining area, very active mining area in Rupununi, and arsenic was identified since 1949. And people are drinking the water and working there. So I'm saying there's activity going on right in the middle of an arsenic presence.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I just wanted to insist on the specificity of the mercury in the hydro system. Of course, soil erosion increased the input of other metals, toxic metals, but only mercury is subject to the three processes I presented: methylation, bioaccumulation, and biomagnification in the food chain. We don't observe that with arsenic, we don't observe that with lead, we don't observe that with other toxic metals. So I think that it's also important to keep in mind the specificity of this metal in the hydro system. Even if the concentrations are very, very low, and it's the case everywhere, this metal is subject to the three processes that may affect the environmental health and human health.
Okay.
Just to comment on the issue with things like arsenic and so is that it bioaccumulates in the organism, right? And remember, things like arsenic and so can be picked up quite easily by some kinds of foods that we grow, right? So if we now have soils that have high arsenic content and we're going to say promote agriculture in that area, right? We would then have to start looking at it. How is it being phytoaccumulated into the plant? And then based on that, maybe start looking at mitigation processes and those kind. So that's why that's what I'm getting at. Because when you now break up the soil, as you said, from the mining areas, right? And they fly, and if you were to look at Arakaka and those places, the manganese dust is very fine. It flies all over the place. It flies into people's houses and all that. At least I know it used to do that. I don't know if the method they're using now does that also. And that can carry the contaminant, and there will be a gradual buildup within the organism that is absorbing it. So that is where I am coming from in terms of that kind of bioaccumulation by the organism, as you said, over a number of years. And coming back to the same thing with mercury, you know, people, I'm quite certain you've seen this in the mines, after they make the amalgam and they squeeze it out with the kerchief, and so some of those guys put the amalgam knot, as they say, in their mouth, bite it to actually get out more mercury, and then the guys would just comfortably spit the mercury back into the bottle. You know, it's crazy. So I do agree with your point. It said, I think yesterday, in which you said we don't see too much of the things. I guess maybe it's because we're very fortunate here in some, you know, we get some divine dispensation when we look at the amount of stupid things we do, and we still survive.
You're talking about traffic, I guess. So colleagues, just so that this doesn't degenerate into another scientific discussion, we're trying to get past the description of the work that's been done and the particular challenges, because we spent the whole morning kind of looking at, trying to unpack that, right? What I want to do maybe for the next 5-10 minutes is to introduce my co-facilitator. He's been anxious to meet you, but he's very violent. So we need to remove anything that has liquids or glass from off of the table. Like I see a cup with some drink there. He's very violent. He might knock that over. Teacups are also in danger. Spectacles, possibly. Phones are okay. So this is my co-facilitator. What I want to do is introduce him to you. So, you know, the rule with him is whoever is holding it gets to speak. So if you want it, you have to signal the person who has it, and they will throw it to you. It's not a gentle pass me down kind of thing. It's a toss around the room kind of thing. He's going to help us with 3 things. What I propose we do is have a quick session to see if we can identify and tease out what are some of the absolutely crucial, top of the list priority problems, particularly those that would affect communities? Looking at the topic, right? Environmental and human health considerations. So just to tease out, just quickly, like what do you think those are based on the discussions we've had yesterday, but particularly this morning, and of course based on the presentation this afternoon. And after that, let's look at what may already be happening to try and address those problems. Maybe somebody somewhere else already has a process going on, a project going on, some kind of initiative being planned. Let's toss those onto the table as well, and then look at how do we, what do you think we should do to sensitize some of these important stakeholders out there with regards to all of this? And what are your thoughts on sensitization processes to make sure that the right audiences are being reached with the content that we've been grappling with here these 2 days? So that's how I propose we manage the remaining time today. Is that cool? And then we'll have a wrap-up at the end. Cool? All right, so let's start. Just really quick reactions, no dissertations necessary. Quick reactions. What do you think are the priority problems from a human/community perspectives? Anybody want to take the first effort? Otherwise, I'll just throw it and whoever it hits, that's it. You're it. No volunteers? Come on, guys. You know each other. There's nothing to be scared of. Johan, well done.
One of the priority points, I think for sure, came up in Group 4's discussion, which was the long-term effect on the health of the persons in the communities and how we go about establishing, monitoring, and mitigating those effects over time. And keeping a current and solid database that is shared across multiple sectors with that information as well.
I don't know if it throws you. Do you want it first, or do you want me to? Yeah. I know, right? To piggyback off of what Johan was saying, I think coming back to something that was also mentioned earlier, looking at the mines that were closed years and years prior, and looking at the downstream accumulation effects that are possibly occurring in those mines that have been closed, and seeing where and if there are mercury deposits in and around those environmental areas, such as the rivers that would be surrounding that mining area. And you could even extend it further into the wildlife within the area in terms of the bush meat that the communities would be consuming, the fish that the communities would be consuming. So really narrowing down on the environmental impacts post-mining and trying to understand how much of an accumulation effect exists, if any. I have really bad aim. There you go.
All right, thank you again. You know, I lecture environmental management at the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences, and you know, one of the things that I often tell my students is that we're really not managing the environment, you know. Mother Nature can't quite manage herself, right? What we are actually managing is people's impact on the environment. And at the end of the day, what we really have in environmental management, it's a fundamental issue of human behavior. And that's the core of it, right? Even when we do the natural sciences, we are looking at the impacts as a result of some human action or human behavior. And one of the things that has to be prioritized, and probably is the hardest challenge, and a challenge I often pose to my students, and it's quite difficult to answer, is how do we actually change human behavior? If we have particular impacts, then we require the community to change their culture of practice. And in doing so, we need to understand the mechanisms to changing that culture of practice. We are now having a discussion here about mercury-free mining and the fact that it can potentially, or has potentially drive mercury smuggling, right? And, you know, for us to alleviate even the conversation of mercury use, we have to change that culture of mercury use, which means finding ways to incentivize mercury-free mining, making it attractive. Because at the end of the day, these miners looking at this from a business standpoint, from a livelihood standpoint. They're not looking at it from an environmental standpoint. And we have to be able to now align that environmental standpoint with the fact that these are businessmen, these are employees, employed persons who are making a livelihood out of this. And if we want them to change that, that has to be changed in a way where it does not compromise that livelihood.
You got two young fellas over here that just don't want to join the group, man. What we must do with them? You think they're shy or? Or we give them a chance to ease forward, but it's hard for the ball to reach you at that distance, you know. We got two seats right here waiting for you. All over to you.
Yeah. One of the things that, well, I've attended conferences like these before, but one of the things that really stands out are not the key agencies that play a role in mining. We have GGMC, we have Guyana Forestry Commission, few occasions we might have Lands and Survey, but I think what we would need is more ministry buy-in. Natural resources always plays a part, but what about Ministry of Health, vector control? Apart from Ministry of Health, education, the other ministries need to be more aware of what's being done, not only by the agencies that they might fall under, but by ministries themselves. I think if we had that push from government officials, I think we will have a stronger, or send a stronger message so that miners could, you know, and community members could be more involved.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I caught it correctly, but in governance, there's something called whole of government. The idea that government is supposed to work like a unit, even though they have different departments and ministries and arms and so on. They have to have a way of coordinating and working for effectiveness. Can't keep it in silos. So I hope I captured that right. Okay.
So it's interesting because I recorded the same thing differently. I put in institutional collaboration because I was thinking about a little bit more than just, I heard ministries and ministries leading through, but I was thinking that it's more than just the ministries that would have to be collaborating, that would have to be involved. And I thought I've been kind of, so I was saying that I think it's more than just this notion of the whole government and ministries involved, but having institutions in general, some of which may be governmental and some of which may be non-governmental. Some may be just state institutions, not government institutions, like the university, for example. And yes, so that's what I'm saying. What I was hearing. This is years of experience speaking. Right, but when I was here, I'm just saying the way I heard what he was saying, and that's why I noted the difference between Laurence and I and how we interpreted that. Yeah. But which version of it? Uh-huh. So, Laurence will catch for you.
The whole idea is that you have to get agreement of several ministries / departments, and then you have to prioritize what needs to be done, and the prioritization is what challenges people. We just talked about mercury as though you go in the field, you check on mercury, you come back out, you go back in and you check on arsenic, you come back out and you go back in and you check on antimony. What we're talking about is, hey, can't we just do a multi-element approach as we go along and try out what needs to be done or what could be done? That calls for prioritizing what a government ministry already did for, in October, did budget, gone up to Ministry of Finance already, and then he comes along and says, you know, we could go and check for arsenic in Arakaka. And he said, no, by budget finished for the year. You have to be able to get over that. Yes. You know, what I'm saying is each ministry does its budget, finish with that, done with that, and they come to a seminar like this, and they say, well, I don't have budget.
So how is it bilateral or is it?
No, this is
okay.
Multi. I guess I still got my hands. So I'm happy that I handed the ball over to you because we're not saying different things. All I'm saying is that beyond the ministry, there are other actors that are necessary for the same collaboration, the same efficiency in our acting. And I think it's an appropriate place perhaps to just throw something onto the table. And I started discussing with a couple of folks around since this morning when it occurred to me. And it's just to think about perhaps the usefulness of a more permanent collaborative that is focused on the responsible mining, right? Which would include all the ministries and all the other possible actors.
Thanks, true. So, thank you. So this little session we just had was just to try and tease out what's really burning for you, right? And I think we've got 4 really hot and I think very obvious topics. One is, this is the human health considerations is kind of the reason why we started talking about mercury anyway, right? Because of the impact on human beings, but of course there's an impact on the environment as well. So biodiversity is sort of in a corner, not to diminish it, but just to get it to fit. And then the second one here about the downstream accumulation and how to deal with mine closures and what remains when everybody else is gone and nature has to deal with this stuff. So that's also been coming out. Changing human behaviors and cultures, of course, that could link to all of these, right? This could almost be cross-cutting because Stefan is right. We're not managing the environment any more than we're managing time. We're managing ourselves. That's the only thing we have control over, really. So that's an interesting way of looking at it, possibly a cross-cutting. And then we had this really lovely conversation about collaboration. I just ended up here. I was trying to drill down, starting with whole of government, but no, it's more than that. It's institutional collaboration. And then you started to mention like NGOs and like communities. So we actually have to have a way of collaborating. Now, Calvin has just brought into the equation this idea of, do we need a way of working that establishes a framework for collaboration, whether it's a platform, an entity, something that fosters the collaboration. And that's actually the second question of the 3 that we want to finish today. So the question is, are there existing institutions, processes, platforms, frameworks that would facilitate us collaborating on any of these priorities or any other ones that you might know of? I mean, you know, rather than reinvent the wheel, I guess is the point. Is there something we can already start working with or building on? So, the floor is open. My collaboration friend is ready for you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I used to play cricket when I was young. Could still catch. So I'm from the Ministry of Natural Resources. I don't know if I introduced myself before. Apologies for that. Michelle Astwood. I'm an environmental specialist with the ministry, supporting policy and planning for the mining and forestry sectors. So within the ministry, there's a national working group for the National Action Plan for the Minamata Convention, which specifically looks at the, the strategic activities under the NAP, so particularly related to mining and mercury. So it was started last year. Well, it was started earlier this year. We moved forward with looking at potential implementation of the NAP and having a technical working group with the key players in the room to discuss that moving forward. But as Mr. Wilford rightly said, prioritization is always a ticklish one in terms of discussing which activities start first, which activities start second, whose ministry or whose agency has the necessary budget to support the activities that we've outlined, and where we don't have the funding, where we'll get the funding from. Nevertheless, it's a platform that can be seen as a potential collaborative and structure moving forward as we go to 2024. But just to be reminded, the key objective of that working group is specifically to address the issues within the National Action Plan, and specifically looking at mining and mercury and the way that government sees us moving forward, at least from now until 2027, with a phased reduction of the use of mercury in the small and medium scale mining sector, or the ASGM sector. So that's just one platform that exists. And of course, within the ministry, we're a small ministry, and we are happy when we have support from different agencies, different donors who are willing to support us with, pulling things along. WWF has been one of those partners who's been willing to support the National Working Group. And if there are others who are willing to support the National Working Group, maybe the scope of a National Working Group can be able to focus on if there are other emerging, issues or challenges that can be addressed by one group. Of course, we are welcome to do that. But that's just something that's already existing, and with support, it can grow into something that really has the type of presence to pull the different projects together, pull the different activities together, and maybe see tangible results moving forward.
So it's a question that I just want. Can I borrow your ball, please? Thank you, sir.
Oh, no. All right, go on.
I beg him nicely, eh? No, I kind of got a bit of the answer to the question I wanted to ask, but I want to ask it more specifically because I like the base. Do you see a room for expanding the mandate of that particular working group to go? Because you mentioned it's specific to mercury and the Minamata Convention. Do you see potential for expanding? And if I may make a comment, because I'm mindful based on experiences that sometimes when, I know, Michelle is also, I think you're the second focal point for Minamata Convention, right? So she didn't say that, I think it was important. But I find sometimes that when persons come from lower levels than Michelle is operating, in ministries they're apprehensive about saying what's possible collaboration because they feel it's a commitment. I would like to ask, with permission of the facilitator, that we consider this a technical dialogue, right? That is non-committal. We're asking what's technically possible. It may require some other things to be done in order to make it happen. So let's just think about what's technically possible.
Point, yeah. And maybe we should have said that at the beginning. This is an exploration, nothing formal or legal or binding. We're just trying to explore, and absolutely right. Thank you very much, Calvin. So, Patrick, over to you.
Yes. There is an ACT, National Science Research Council, was it? Right? That was based more on science. I remember we made an attempt. I was in a group that made an attempt. That was when Narvin was around. We made an attempt to widen it where we were looking at a national science policy that was not just focused on science, but was also focused on utilizing science and bringing all the other stuff that is needed to drive development in general. What I find in the normal situation here is that we have a lot of silos, as you were saying earlier, Lachi. We have silos, right? And there is also sometimes, I've seen instances where even within the same ministry, the ring finger don't know what the middle finger is doing, right? It's so bad, right? And so there's a need for more openness, for one. I think people need to be less protective of their turf, right? And these are something that I find very important, protection of turf, right? And that is the only way we're going to widen the scope of collaboration, because everybody wants to be the person who's saying it, the person who's doing it, and all of that. I've actually seen we move from one minister to the next minister, and when the same person was working on the same project, finishing it off, you didn't hear anything about the first minister, right? And those are the kind of things we need to be aware of.
So, fair critique of these processes. At the beginning, you were mentioning about another group. Was there a second group?
Science, the National Science Policy. That was what we were developing. No, not council. It's National Science Policy, which would fall under the office of the president, and part of it would have been a council. And it was supposed to be a real high-level thing in which it was actually going to be chaired by the president so that we could get things happening, right? Right, that would have been part of it, yes.
So just to clarify, this policy is still in existence, or it's
we have the draft and everything. It actually went up to cabinet one time when President Ramata was in charge. It went up to there, and then we had some kickback from some supposedly big shots within the system because their name was not called. And then it was kind of thing, but the document is still there. It was done under a UNESCO project within the Ministry of Education on the insert.
right?
Yes, the National Science and Research Council Act is still existing, and we could even use that as a basis, but we found it was limited when we did an analysis of it.
What's it called? National Science
Research Council.
Act?
It's an act.
Oh. Okay, that's interesting. Before we move on, just to check in, and Michelle, no pressure at all, but Calvin's question about the Minamata Working Group and the scope, again, nothing binding at all, but just your own perspective. Is there any potential for expanding the mandate?
Thanks, and I respect that there's no pressure. And yes, I'm also one of the focal points for the Minamata Convention between the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission. I mean, from a policy and an implementation perspective, we work together to support the Minamata Convention and our obligations. And in terms of, is there potential for expanding the scope? Well, I guess there's a reason why I remain this afternoon is really to listen to the outcomes from this and to then report back to my ministry. And, between Mr. Laurence and Calvin, you guys are in communication with us. We'll try to see what's discussed. But from here, I will move, go back to the ministry and indicate the appetite of our stakeholders and see what's possible, of course. And that's what I'm able to commit at this point in time. I hope it's not, like, oh, she didn't say nothing much, but, I mean, that's the commitment.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to highlight one potential regional group that our faculty has been working with. That's the Surveyor Amazonia group. It's a Surveyor Amazonia group. It's a technical and research group that our faculty has done some projects with. They've recently did a project with NASA to do some training on GIS and remote sensing, and we had a couple of our lecturers participated in that training session. So it's a larger regional body that we can look at leveraging, because these are the kinds of issues that that group tends to work with. And I wanted to put one comment towards this entire process of formation of working groups and information-based networks. Been to a lot of conferences across the Caribbean over the years, and this conversation, it's the same conversation in many other spheres of our society. I've heard it in agriculture, I've heard it in trade, I've heard it in the environment, and mining. And there's always one common thread that we tend to bypass in these conversations. And I was always going to put in my economic hat here. At the end of these days, these things cost something, right? It requires some significant investment. Creating a working group, creating a network database is not a cheap thing. And we don't often converse about who is going to be the ones to actually invest in this. And what I've worked on databases, and unfortunate to say we did our database for coastal research for Guyana. And unfortunately, the life of the database was correlated with the life of the funding that we had for the project, all right? So the point I was trying to get at is, if you look at how some of these information-based networks operate in the more developed countries, they actually have a very strong privatized aspect. They operate as a private service. And being a private service, that then generates the funding to continue to maintain and expand and invest in the development of it. And now they could reach the point where they could invest in AI for these network databases, right? So that is something that we have not really done here regionally. We have never looked at how can we privatize our information and networks, and leveraging these networks and leveraging leveraging as a private product. Right now, NASA is privatizing their data services. So that's just to tell you where these organizations are. And they are one of the premier institutes when it comes to data worldwide, and they are privatizing it. So if the mighty United States and NASA could do that, then these are the types of thoughts that we need to put forward when we're thinking about these ideas as well.
Thanks very much, Stefan. Sorry, let me just give a fresh voice. Let's prioritize, if it's okay. I notice there's a lot of people who haven't spoken yet. I'd love to hear more thoughts, especially more thoughts on other processes we can consider.
Thank you. I think you're speaking about the HCCO group. Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an important initiative. There is another one called IANAS initiative.
Yes.
And we are working together with the AXO group in English. It's mainly a group of scientists who are working on it's mainly a group of scientists working on Amazonian issues, mainly social, environmental, and sometimes political also. And I just wanted to add, there is another initiative in discussion now at the UNEP, yeah, which is, we are trying to develop GIEC, a new group on pollution, chemical compounds, and waste. Yeah, so it's also can be a new platform for discussion. From the UNEP, yeah, but scientists are welcome too, and we are in discussion with UNEP to enter in this group, in this GIEC.
That's very interesting. So we're picking up a couple of local processes as well as international, regional processes. Just as I have the microphone, would the low carbon development strategy be a process that could be, because it has a multi-stakeholder steering committee component to it, which already includes stakeholders like women, youth, indigenous people, private sector, etc. And because the aims and goals of the low carbon development strategy relate firstly to forests and then of course to human development that needs to take place while, we're developing whilst conserving, if you will. So I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. It is a process. We know it has funding. So going to the question of maybe, how do we access resources to get things done? A microphone for Ariane.
It's good that you mentioned that because it was something that I was also thinking about before. I'm not au fait with the details, but I do know that there is a section in the LCDS 2030 which highlights indigenous forests and the economic value that they'll get from those forests. So if there is something in relation to, if they were to remove that forest for mining, would that impact the economic value that they can get from that forest? So I was thinking about it along the lines of that. So there's that area of it to consider.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I had to do a lot of work with the LCDS even when it was at UG, when it came to UG. I remember making a big input that energy was important. It's not just simply forestry services, because if you don't look at energy, right, and that's how we can push in a lot of the other energy issues. When it first came around, when it was now being developed in the earlier stage. But the thing is, what I know of the LCDS is that it is still limited along certain lines, and it has the platform and maybe some of the foundation as well as the political support. So what we may want to do with that is expand its scope to allow it now to look at these other aspects. So I can see it could be maybe the foundation on which we could build out a better system in terms of a national development, something related to the national development strategy.
I hear you. And so, sorry if I can, before Calvin takes over, it's kind of sounding like we need a platform at a certain level. Maybe you want to call it a working level, a technical level or whatever. But then it needs to be connected to something larger, perhaps at a national level, exactly, which allows us to have a national impact, and then of course to be reinforced at a regional, international level by backward focused attention. So, Calvin.
It's interesting. I didn't say anything to Laurence about this just now, but that's almost precisely the intervention I wanted to make. That things like the National Science and Research Council and like the LCDS, those very high level engagements, they provide that nesting for what will have to be a lower level kind of technical working. Otherwise it gets lost. It has to be able to come down to a level where it actually can hit the road and move. And then, so that nesting I think is absolutely perfect. Something that's technical under a national umbrella that also gets support from a regional. It gets that funding, that permanent funding stream.
Has the oh, he's there. I thought he was kidnapped.
Mr. Wolf, I got to catch this time, eh? Oh, yeah. sorry, that's my bad throw. That's poor throw.
I'd like to make a comment first and then think. My information is that the National Development Strategy has already, in terms of LCDS, has already captured the elemental areas necessary for this research and in mercury use and proper mining and so on. What has happened, of course, is that everybody's busy. So nobody gets down to the nitty-gritty as to whether you did what you were supposed to do and you did what you were supposed to do and who's coordinating and so on. The Miners Association made a comment on the LCDS, and the comment is that the miner is there to mine, and he would prefer to have engagement with one party coming in. He really doesn't want to see the malaria guy come in one day, followed by the chikungunya guy, followed by the health and safety person, followed by the mercury guy. So he would prefer if there's a guy wearing one cap and deals with the effects, the efficiencies, and whatever else the miner is supposed to take care of. And so in our interest in the mining industry, we want to promote a harmonized approach to these interventions so that we can see one face coming and taking care of all that we need to get done.
Thank you, Mr. Wolford. Coincidentally, on the forestry side, they've been complaining bitterly, the concession holders, about having too many agencies to deal with. They come to Georgetown, they gotta go to GFC, who sends them over to Lands and Surveys, who sends them across to EPA, who sends them down the road to GRA, who sends them over to NIS. And it's like alphabet soup after a while, you know? And after a while, they might say, no, it's easier not to comply. Let me just, you know, deal with it when the moment arrives. So the point is well taken, and I think it comes back to this question of intergovernmental collaboration, and how do we make systems easier for the persons who are relying and depending on those systems. Friendly government, I suppose you could call it. Okay, so let's say we have some ideas of different types of processes. Let me just check around quickly. Anybody got any other knowledge, any other intel, informally of course, of other processes that we can build on in pursuit of the agenda that we've been exploring for the last 2 days? Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right. That being said, sorry, Benita, my dear, my apologies. As is you, I'll bring it. Since I'll bring the microphone.
No, thank you very much. No, I was going to comment on the SRJS process that WWF had started, and I think it's not a standing committee that exists, but the process that they started in 2017. Was it 2017? Shared Resources Joint Solutions. So they started this collaborative approach with the international agencies, government, as well as communities. And it was a good model that we can follow going forward in terms of ASGM and how we address coal mining in communities. Yet WWF was leading it with IUCN Netherlands. But it's not something that is still in existence, SRJS. Yeah, Shared Resources Joint Solutions. So yes, I think that was a good model, and I think that that is an approach that should be reestablished if we're going to deal with this. I know you have ARM and IRD and all these people involved, but there's no local counterparts other than GGMC, right? With it, and us, we're here? You can't, UG, exactly. So it just stops at that technical level and doesn't come down to NGOs and civil society actors. But the SRJS process included civil society input. And so when they come up with these research and the findings, they now bring it to the community level or the civil society, and we package that information in a way that we can take back to the community so that they can easily understand all this technical knowledge. And I think that was important in the SRJS process and should be important in any future collaboration that you might have. So I will throw the ball to Aiesha so she can add all the insights.
Thank you. Yes, that was a project. It was global. But in terms of what Benita said, the interest was to ensure shared resources, joint solutions, as in having NGOs or community-based organizations, communities, government, even businesses, private sector to some extent, on tackling an issue in that collective manner. And so one has the knowledge or expertise in gathering information, another have the information, and another may be have the expertise in providing, presenting the information. So there's that collaborative effort. And so what we saw that they were collaborative effort. Benito gave the example of where communities would have gathered data on water quality, for instance, or climate-related issues. Then an organization that's more focused on policy looked at that data, looked at that information, put it together, presented it in such a way that there can be engagement with community on one level, and then there can be engagement at the policy level to influence what sort of decisions that, is made at a national level, or more providing that kind of information to a more, with the wider public. And so the idea was to share the knowledge, share the experience, and having not a platform, a formal platform, but a mode or a mechanism for sharing learnings and also sharing expertise so that you can reach a common goal. It is not, as she said, it's more on the model or the experience that was gained from that rather than, like an actual structure that exists.
Thanks, Benita. That's really helpful. We have to consider all of this. Even if we end up, or you guys end up, creating something new, at least you can build on the lessons that have been generated already as to what works, what stakeholders seem to appreciate in terms of how they can participate best, efficiently and effectively. Cool. So we've got a lot of thoughts there to mull on going forward. The last thing we want to do before we consume these snacks that Calvin is sharing out, we want to have a quick discussion about sensitization. And based on your familiarity with the content that we've been grappling with for the last day and a half or two, and of course, bearing in mind things like the Community Empowerment Initiative, the whole observatory discussion that we had earlier today, do you have thoughts on how best to begin approaching the sensitization process? Communities need sensitizing. Maybe there are others that need sensitizing. Who are those others? And how best to begin making that journey of communicating or sharing what we now know or what we have learned with these significant others. So the floor is open. I'll throw the ball, but not the microphone. Or maybe Aiesha can throw the ball and I'll follow with the mic. Anybody would like to take the floor? Sensitization.
Good afternoon. One way I believe that for the sensitization process is what we call piggybacking with these sister agencies, or knowing what the agenda or the planned activities that other agencies like the Ministry of Health has for these communities, because one thing they have in common is malaria, right? The Ministry of Health does a lot of work on malaria, and at the same time we try to implement the agenda for mercury at the same time. So as Mr. Wolford and others would have mentioned, they're not just going to do one thing and then come out back and then the next group go and do again. So we go at these ministries that have a common interest, for example, health, and mercury, we're talking about health. So we get what the agenda is and we try to blend it or mix it together. Because from one experience in 2016, conducting interviews in Arakaco and 14 miles and Port Mountain, the whole Northwest, is when you approach the miners, they were like, just last week, somebody went in here and talked about the same thing. Now you coming again. Now these miners, they got work, they got things to do. The sun is out and everybody out there, so they don't have the time to talk to you about this again and again. So we try to get to know what Ministry of Health is doing, what labor is doing, what somebody is doing, and we try to put it together.
Collaboration again.
Collaboration,
Yeah.
right.
I'm sure he could have mentioned that the GGDMA has pushed for and gotten the setting up of a memorandum of cooperation. And they're talking with Ministry of Labor now to do another memorandum of cooperation so that the people who are coming in must first of all have cleared with their heads and so on. Who's going in, what are they going to cover, and what outcomes are they looking for? Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. One of the outreach programs that has worked for us in the past is collaborating with the Ministry of Health and doing what we call some nighttime workshops with the miners. In that way, we don't have to interrupt them working during the day. And we met with them in the evening, so we were able to speak to them about mercury, talk to them about improved mineral recovery. The persons from Ministry of Health were able to speak to them about HIV, AIDS, STDs, and malaria. We were also able to share brochures and so on, show videos, and also distribute hammock nets and that kind of stuff. So there's one thing that has worked for us in the past. No, at the camps. Like we would get persons from nearby camps to come over here to one camp. So that's just one approach.
So you found up your friends or upstairs decided that get this stuff?
I think that time we had a better relationship with Ministry of Health. We used to do a lot of, I don't know who organized it, but yeah, we had a better, yeah. They were able to distribute condoms and all these things, yeah. Yeah.
And also linking it to standing institutions, like a ministry, right? It's not like an NGO or a project that will be, you know, gone perhaps in a while. But perfect. Thank you very much so far. Aiesha.
I wanted to touch on the mode of sensitization, if I could use that, in terms of making sure that we use the right methods, which whether if we're meeting with, like I was told, with minors, an easy way of reaching minors is through WhatsApp. So don't try to, you know, print out big posters or long reports, but using WhatsApp and in WhatsApp message, not no long document. But I think it's important to be sensitive to what's already produced, whether it's related to mercury or biodiversity or whatever it is. Have a way of collaborating, not in terms of going out, but what's already produced, what sort of information is already packaged, either by video and so on, and ensure that we are utilizing those and not creating new ones, and then we have a lot piled up. And I say piled up because we even have a lot of ours, and people can come and ask and still use in their sensitization drive. So sharing among those who are involved in the sensitization, to share what they have produced already. And then so everyone is building on that and utilizing the same kinds of, utilizing the products that are there already. It's important to do that.
Yeah, on sensitization, I wanted to make a comment about the format and where I can't even catch. about the format in which the sensitization occurs. So in Dr. Maurice's presentation, she mentioned they use like comic strips to tell persons about the visual issues that you get from mercury poisoning. And I think that is true for Guyana as well. Like some people go with all these big booklets to the miners, and it might be more efficient or more effective to do a cartoon or an animated video or an ad that is fun, that is attractive and easy to understand. So I think in sensitization, we need to know who our target audience is and be able to break down that message in an attractive and effective way rather than these stick booklets. I think GGMC also spoke about yesterday, they have these boards that are around in certain mining communities to give them information about the different mining claims, how deep it is and all of these things. But some of these information go over a lot of person's head. So I think, you know, you gotta really know who you're targeting and how you package that message in a way that suits your audience. Also, translation is important. Not everything should be in English. You have indigenous communities maybe have a read aloud story or something like that that is translated in the Akwayo Wapisian language. I think that is something we need to take note of.
It's easier. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So that's right. Video and cartoons, it's working pretty well. So and it's so easy to understand, to read, and to share, even with your kids and so on. What we plan to propose for this project to sensitize gold miners and communities is playing. We plan to develop like a serious game, and we want that people play with cards, with pictures, to speak between them, to discuss between them and with us, of course, to try to understand better the complexity of the issue. Because nothing is simple, and it's quite difficult to explain the complexity. So by playing with pictures, with the game on the table and so on, I think it's far easier. So we will try a new form of sensitization next week in media, and we are also preparing a big serious game for the Suriname. It's like it's a game with several cards, and one of the objectives is also to propose to the people to play different roles. For example, we can ask a gold miner playing the role of an indigenous farmer. We will ask to the doctor to play the role of the mayor, and so on. So also we would like to work with the empathy of people may have, and to better understand what are the constraints, what are the challenges every kind of actors have to face.
So
I promise I'm not making it unilateral or bilateral here, but game-based learning is something that Policy Forum Guyana is very big on, and that is the organization I'm representing here today. So Policy Forum Guyana actually, under the SRJS program, developed several games, one of which is called the River Guardians, that directly links to mercury and the impacts of it on freshwater species as well as the rivers that exist. Apart from that, there's the Eco Snake and Latter Days Earth help us. So there's these large games that you play that engage youths as well as university students to have a better understanding. So when you mentioned game, I was really passionate about that thought, and I think it's an excellent initiative that we can apply to the mining and mercury sector because it has worked for general environmental, especially with water quality. Thank you.
So I think
Collect the ball.
I think I could catch. I'll make sure I give a good throw this time, Mr. I just was thinking here, we all drinking from the same pitcher, literally. Because this is the second time I desired intervention, it went that way, and then she started saying almost exactly what I wanted to say, but there's one slight difference. I am happy to hear of the examples that are already on the ground in Guyana where we're using different ways to communicate the message. I'm particularly interested in the theater element because what I assume of the nature of our culture, and that might be something that's really a strong vehicle, to use the arts to communicate the message. That's something that I'll be looking at in general environmental work. One important thing I wanted to ask about is about studying the effectiveness rather than assumed effectiveness. And I wonder to what extent we are studying it. We are using a technique and evaluating the efficiency of the technique to accomplish the outcome that we are desirous of a company. And I think that is something from a personal level, but I think perhaps even, I'm not going to put CCS on the spot, they're just here providing services, but I know of some of the interest in the work of the communications center, that it might be something of interest to be able to take an academic approach to understanding which is most efficient and in what context. That's one bit. And then the other bit, which is just echoing what Benita said, which is the need for translation into the languages. I think we have the facilities now to be able to translate. We have translators, official translators, to be able to move things from English into a number of the indigenous languages, which makes it applicable in those spaces where persons are not really conversing on English. That's not their thing.
Thank you, sir. I particularly want to take that example that we just mentioned, because when the lady from Policy Forum spoke, I had a sense of what would happen. Somebody from GGMC will go back to the desk and say, this is the idea. But even if it goes up to the commissioner, he will check and say, there's no budget line for this. You should have got this done before September when we were doing our budget. And even when you go to the board for a special arrangement, somebody has to justify it. What we need to recognize is that when we have these types of discourses, they're wonderful, they're nice, but the head of department doesn't show up, and the deputy head doesn't show up. And the people who come are interested, but they're not, with the greatest respect to them, they're not the decision makers. And we need to find a way to put the heads of department together and have conversation that you could get action on. If I'm wrong, GGMC, tell me I'm wrong. Sorry.
Thank you very much. If I could be permitted to just add a 2 cents on this too. The point about getting the senior leadership to be on board is a really important piece of the puzzle, and maybe we can integrate that into the platform or whatever mechanism we are using to work effectively together. I also want to be a bit of a spoiler here, because from my experience of years in civil society as well as with development programs, I know there's a tendency to forget results and measure results. We do a lot of sensitization and education, voter education, civic education, health education, and we're just pumping stuff out as if pumping it out is enough. We can't change what we can't measure. That's a famous saying. And so knowing what baselines are already in place and knowing the impact of the efforts we are making to sensitize, educate, raise awareness, whatever. Otherwise, it's just money down the drain in a black hole. We have no idea what kind of effect we're having. I love the board game, I love posters, I love, animated videos, but do they work? And I think the capacity to measure the effectiveness of those techniques, just like we had a discussion about the scientific standardization of methodologies, etc., I think is really important, so that we don't pretend like we're making a difference when in fact we're missing the mark. Volume doesn't necessarily equate with quantity or quality, sorry, So anyway, just to make that point as I have the microphone. Any last thoughts on sensitization before we move on? I want to check and see if folks online are signaling. I haven't gotten any signals, no? Okay, nothing from the online posse. Anything else from anyone else? All right, so I guess y'all ready to go home. Before I hand it to, we have Laurence and Aiesha and Calvin who will give us some closing remarks according to the agenda. I guess a few minutes each. It's on the agenda. No, I didn't okay, go. So it's really, at this point, it's really just my duty to conclude this session. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks for being kind to my friend. He really worked hard today, and he didn't break any glasses. I'll use the opportunity to make one small announcement, perhaps related to my own sort of professional work as a forest governance facilitator. For quite a few years now, we've been working on something called a Stakeholder Engagement Guide, which boils down our Guyanese experience in the natural resource sector in terms of engagement and says these are the best practices we can find of how to do good stakeholder engagement, not just an event, but a process. We're talking about involving communities, for example. We're talking about involving government. How do we achieve that holy grail of development practice in terms of participation? So this guide is going to be coming out in another few months, I would guess. We're moving to print shortly, but I'd like to stay in touch with as many of you who are interested in that kind of work so we can continue to collaborate even after today. And of course, the document, the guideline, and the other tools that come with it will be available electronically and potentially in hard copy if you're at the head of the line. So just to make a mention of that, I think we have a lot of work to do. It's been a great privilege to work with you. This is kind of my first mining excursion. Forestry is my usual thing, as I said before. But you've been a great crowd to work with. I've been honored, and it's been a great pleasure. So thank you very much, Calvin, for having me to be a part of the process, and thank you all for your participation and encouragement. So with that, I'll pass the microphone to Dr. Laurence for her concluding remarks.
Well, thank you. So first, I'm very grateful for the invitation and for the organization of these 2 days events. It was very fruitful and very interesting, and I was very pleased to listen to the students, ex-students, presenting their work. It's really, really exciting and promising for the University of Guyana. So I was really, really happy with that. One point I would like to add also is that I think there is a high need of good analytical laboratory here in the country, in Guyana, and the University of Guyana can maybe offer this opportunity to propose reliable chemical analysis in case of, well, sometimes one institution, maybe the Ministry of Health and so on, organize biomonitoring or environmental monitoring on mercury, but also on other toxic elements. So we are very pleased to participate to the intercalibration and to the certification of this lab, of your lab. I think it's very important because one of the objectives of our work in your country and in other countries is that to ensure that everything can be done in the country. We don't want more exporting samples and even exporting knowledge, that's okay. But we import knowledge, we import techniques, and at the end the objective is that you continue doing that in the best way. So one first point is ensuring important an analytic lab here. The second point I'm also thinking about is how measuring the impact of our project on the ground tomorrow, in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years. Also, it's a question a lot of scientists are asking. It's pretty difficult to to imagine the future, but I think it's important to be patient and also to think about which kind of indicators can be proposed in order to evaluate more or less the impact of the project. So, and I think another important point here is the discussion that we have opened between different stakeholders and between the ministries, between GGMC, with GGMC, with the GFC and WWF and so on, mixing academic actors with institutional actors and also association and people from the civil society. So it's really important. It's the heart of the transdisciplinary science and sustainability science. So it's a very good point, and it's a first steps, I think, of long collaboration. So thank you very much for everybody, for everyone, for your participation, for your active participation, and the motivation to continue your work. Thank you.
And I'll just take 2 minutes because I might have been speaking all day. I just wanted to touch on the fact that this collaboration with the University of Guyana is an important one that we in the project saw as valuable, but also providing input and connecting various stakeholders at the level of the university, not only in Guyana, but also this project is implemented in Suriname, and so we are doing similarly in Suriname, where there's so much knowledge, teaching, learning, research that's happening within our country, and ensuring that we have the space to present and share what's done, what can be done, how it can be improved. And so we're very thankful that we can collaborate with the University of Guyana to do this. And with IRD's approach as a research institution and providing that partnership to host or co-host this event, WWF is really pleased to do this and be a part of this. And personally, I look forward to doing things like this when we can work with students and lecturers and heads of departments at the university to really see different aspects of training, discussion, providing a space for presenting work and building knowledge. Personally, I like contributing to that. And so I'm grateful that you took part and all the participants that took part from since yesterday. That you can really provide good input and solutions and actions to move forward with. We are, as I said before, we're in the final year of our project, and even currently we are doing a revision of the work plan going forward towards the end of the project, and looking at results that we would like to capture, and we're talking to different ones to see what's necessary, what's urgent, within this final phase that we can restructure, but also bring some important results and products, and not just to say that we did this, we did that, and this is the original plan, this is what we're running with. But we are doing a revision now to see what's possible, so this conversation would be helpful, I think, to help us to identify a few things that can either be kick-started as we end the project or can be produced by the end of the project. So thank you for your input. Thanks to Calvin personally for running with this all for a few weeks well on different fronts. I don't think we could have gotten this done without him personally being involved. And Laurence and all the other facilitators, thank you so much. And the presenters, IRD, my colleagues from WWF France for partnering and being here to be a part of this discussion and also in the field. Thank you for all the other partners for the implementation, participating in the implementation of the project. Like GGMC, you didn't get to hear on the aspects that we're doing in the field, and we're partnering on that front, and also with the Ministry of Natural Resources as we support the Minimat work and so many others. So thank you very much.
So I wanted to cover maybe two main areas and then the second bit in parts. The first bit is just to highlight the commitment that we have to the deliverables. So Laurence pointed out that we have we've been very transparent, very open about what is it we're trying to achieve and what is it we intend to put out. So the tangible output from this would be a conference report that will capture synopsis of everything that would have been presented, but also the discourse and what we're we've put out as possible. And that will be shared with everyone that participated in the institutions that participated. I think there may be some elements of this that is just publicly available for consumption. The recordings, we have to work through the bit of editing and so on, but the recordings will also be available for persons to be able to view, go over again and so on. So we'll work through that over the next couple of weeks. And so making that real and implementing the ideas, moving them forward, I think is something that I look forward to in all aspects of this. So that's the first thing I want to do. The second thing, I say thanks to IRD and WWF for working with us on making this possible. I made a personal investment in ensuring, and I always reflect back, was this worth it? And I think I already said somewhere up front in the day that, yeah, before we even got to the end there, I think it was definitely worth it. Just the engagement we had yesterday said it was worth the effort put in to make this happen. I didn't do it absolutely alone. We had some significant support within the faculty. I stole the dean's PA for a bit, so Ms. Crystal Stevens across there has been providing some administrative support. I introduced the rapporteurs, which we called up a little while ago. So Ms. Washington, Mr. Rover, and Ms. Fredericks. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, when I recognized that we had some things that were kind of putting us in a crunch spot and we may need some help early in the morning, I kind of went home and said, what are you doing tomorrow, my good daughter? And she's like, what is it? And I asked for her help, and she came out and she spent yesterday. And then she got up early this morning. I'm like, are you coming back today? She said, yes. So I guess there's something in there that's been sparking for her. She's a second-year student, so thanks, Calista. Yes. So the team effort here, Chemturn, Chemturn has been, all this beautiful stuff that you'll see up here branding this conference, this is Chemturn's work. Everything on your folder, the badge, everything. Chemturn did a phenomenal job sort of turning out these things. I would say that insofar as there's breath in my lungs and there's space in my schedule, I will commit fully to us moving these ideas forward. Thank you all for coming out and supporting us. Those that have been here all day yesterday and today, and those that joined us today. Thank you all very much for participating in this. The persons online also, I know there's some people that were out there, but I'm going to highlight Troy again just because I called Troy this morning on an idea that him and I were talking about to ensure that he was on the discussion. And then he told me, oh yeah, I was in there yesterday too. So thanks to all those that have been online and being part of the conversation too. Thank you all, and there's some snacks there. Please don't let it go to waste. There's some juice, fill up, and yes, thank you again. Have a good rest of the evening.